maybe you're taking your mom to go find her new pair of shoes or whatever. You're going on a shopping trip. Say, hey, I heard this community over here had this entertainer was going to be there and I can have a free lunch. Why don't we just go check it out? What I don't know what these I don't even know what goes on behind those doors. What if we just go check that out and make it like the field trip?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Prairie Fire Podcast. So happy to have everybody here today. We're working on our series where we're talking about taking care of mom and dad. And so many of us are going through the transition of all of a sudden our parents now are relying on us for whether it's care, consult, financial support, emotional support, whatever it may be. And it can be a very challenging time. We've heard from many of our clients and friends as they've gone through this, the stress that it's added to their life and the challenges. And so what I've been trying to do is bring in some experts that can help us with this transition a little bit and help us make good decisions for our parents who have done such an amazing job taking care of us and now are relying on us to take care of them a little bit and changing that role reversal, which can be a very difficult thing emotionally. And then, of course, dealing with things financially is also a important part of this. So I'm excited to have my guest today. I'm going to bring in here now Jennifer Voigt. Hello, Jennifer.
Hi, Matt. I'm so
So
excited to be on
yeah,
this.
I'm
Thank you
so excited
for
to have
having
you.
me.
And when I say that Jen and I go way back, we go way back. So she and I worked together, interestingly, on what used to be called the Ingersoll Business Association. And if anybody's familiar with Des Moines, a lot of our listeners are from Central Iowa. The Ingersoll corridor for many years was just getting run down. There was a lot of mom and pop shops. It's always had that kind of historical vibe to it. It used to actually have a trolley that ran down the middle of Ingersoll back in the day. But Jennifer was working for, it was kind of a multi-space office space that you could rent individual offices in down the street. And I was working for what was then Norwest, which became Wells Fargo, in the investment area in the middle of kind of the 2900 block of Ingersoll. We both joined the board about the same time and just were working hard to make Ingersoll a more vibrant place. We had a lot of cool businesses that were beginning to come in. There was beginning of some redevelopment of properties. And we just had a lot of fun doing that. And then we started a party, basically. I don't know what else to call it. The cops would always call it a beer drinking party, but we called it Ingersoll Live. And it would bring together local businesses as kind of almost a farmer's market feel to it. And then it grew to become an art show and music. And now it just celebrated its 20th year. That dates us, Jennifer, a little bit, but
It does. Yep.
Yeah, it just hit its 20th year. And so from there, Jen's been doing a lot of work in senior living and in real estate and helping as parents transition into where they need more care or they want their own living arrangement, whatever that may be. So Jennifer, why don't you just give us a rundown of what you've been working on now, a little bit of your history, just so our listeners can get a feel for where you come from.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a good setup to talk about that. And so I've, in the recent span of about the last, 5-ish years, I've really dedicated my career to to working with older adults, working with our elders. You mentioned kind of the office, the co-working space that I was managing on Ingersoll. Had a long career in that, where managing the day-to-day operations, the P&L of organizations on a regional basis around Iowa, but also is responsible for the sales end of it. And so taking that project management experience, I segued into the world of managing senior housing. I actually became a general manager for, at the time, it was the largest independent living provider. And we'll talk about that in a little bit on what independent means. They had a couple locations here in Des Moines. And I fell in love with the industry. I got great connections with the residents, and really saw the need for it. I realize it's not an industry for everybody, but it's important. And I just really and I still have actually residents and mainly their families that reach out to me. I haven't been there for the last almost 4 years, but I have families still reaching out to me to give me updates on their family, or if their loved one has passed, or if they, I even I'll find little gifts in the mail every now and then. So that personal connection tied me to the industry, but at a point in my life too, which I think this is something you and I talked about, Matt. I'm kind of that prime demographic age in the senior industry where I'm a 50 something.
We don't have to give
Um,
our ages. That's not part of the Prairie
I'm
Fire
okay.
podcast.
I own it. Hey, I own it. I'm not going to tell you what that number looks
It's
like, if
fine.
it's
We'll
crooked or
leave
if
it at a
it's
range. It
curly or
sounds
if
good.
it's got little hard edges on it. I'm not going to tell you that, but I'll own it. But you know, have an oldest daughter, only daughter, aging parents, super close, and also in their 80s. And so being in this industry, um, has helped set me up to work with my parents. And I know we're going off a tangent here early about where I've been, but this is a big part of where I've been. Even though I work in this all the time, I still get really confused. It's a fragmented industry when you look into like how to help mom and dad, whether they stay at home health care, do I go into assisted, do I go into skilled, that type of thing. So I'm saying this to kind of preface that, as we go through kind of this conversation and what I've learned, if you, and maybe your listeners, wherever you are in this process of working with your parents or getting an understanding of the senior housing industry, give yourself a little grace, because it is complicated, it is messy. And if you want any kind of family dynamic or any kind of dysfunction that's ever been festering before to come to the head, it's usually when it comes to, acute situations where mom and you got to make decisions on a family level. So I'd love to, I'm hoping that I can get across some tips that and some experiences I've learned along the way. Um, Having been in a position to meet with families on the spot and walk them through and help guide them to decide whether or not to move mom and dad into the community where I was. So I understand the dynamics of communities and how they're managed and what goes on behind the scenes as well. But I've also know too, as I've gone through on, helping understand where you are in the process of being a caretaker or potential caretaker for your parents. And because I know that was a long way about it, but I've actually,
No, that's
so my
great.
career on the senior aging and the senior element has been defined by me coming into, I dedicated my career around the aging industry and, making the transition from being a general manager for that national independent living community. I put the hat on of I wanted to be that consultant that helped the daughters, the moms and dads, decide where they want to, and if it's the right time to move into whatever type of community it is, where they are in that process, as a consultant, as a paid consultant. And then that segued into me getting, I am now on the real estate investment side of it, management and operations, as a licensed real estate broker, but still carry that hat and can guide people. So to maybe kind of tee this up on where I'm coming in on my experience bringing into this on the day-to-day living in these communities and knowing and living through that from a daughter, a Gen X daughter, and then also on just understanding the industry as a whole, and then maybe some things to look for if you're out searching for a community for your parents.
Great. Great. So, from what I'm seeing in practice, and you live this every day much more than I do, there begins to show some signs that there needs to be a change. And we talked about Then you bring in family dynamics. You got brothers and sisters, and different people are going to have different opinions. But maybe on a macro level, can you give me some considerations when we feel like maybe it's time to relocate mom and dad, things that we should both be thinking about and exploring, and how to best educate ourselves?
Yeah, this is a great starting point, and um, and actually, this is, and I've got a visual too. I'll share, and if you want to, but
Yeah, we'll have,
um,
she's given us a lot of resources. Jennifer has will be included in the show notes here. It's a great list. And then, yeah, any
yeah.
other visuals and stuff that you want to add, we'll make sure that's available for the on the podcast website.
So a term or an acronym, ADL, which is Activities of Daily Living. Um, that is more of the macro before the micro. So these are really the big umbrella activities of daily living that are going to show up, which is are they eating properly? Are they able to bathe and take care of themselves? Normal day to day hygiene, toileting. Are there needs with incontinence, constant, that type of thing? Are they able to dress themselves? And also, are they able to transfer themselves in and out of their bed to be able to get to the commode in the middle of the night? These are big, big activities of daily living that when one or two start going down, but three or four, that's when some kind of quick decisions have to come into place. But a tier below ADLs are instrumental activities of daily living. So these are signs that you think that might be up, you might question yourself, it could be a little gray. And a good tip I had too is compare this to how maybe mom and dad were like 3 to 5 years ago. So here's a couple of little things that start showing up, like are they able to manage their money? Are when you go there to visit them, do you see a bunch of like you go get their mail for them to help them out, and you see a whole bunch of overdue bills, you see notices for whatever going on, credit card statements. Are they able to manage their meds properly?
Mm, that's
Um,
huge, isn't it?
are
I mean, if they have prescriptions they're supposed to be taking and they forget or they lose them, that would be a big sign, wouldn't it?
or if they have multiple, which many of them do multiple, are they just kind of set up and there's a bottle here on the nightstand, there's a
Right.
bottle down by the TV, there's
You
three
mean like my
bottles by
nightstand?
the kitchen sink, there's a bottle on their car console? Are they organizing this? What does that look like? Management, and maybe and then are they able to take care of laundry and housework?
Mm,
You know, some parents just aren't tidy, whatever. But if mom and dad are, companies coming, even the kids are coming, and things are ship shape every time you come in, but then you start coming in and they don't care, or it just is a disaster. These little things, these incremental, instrumental daily living activities are usually precursors to kind of some of those larger activities of daily living. So keeping an eye out for those type of things to and then there's kind of some next step. What do you do when you start noticing these things?
right, exactly.
So I guess maybe segueing myself, what are and I think maybe this is a good time to bring in, okay, so you're noticing some of these things, how do you have that conversation?
Right.
um and so I guess I'd like to break down too where you are, or in the relationship, or in the kind of this kind of where your parents are in the aging journey. So, assuming that there's really not a lot of these ADLs, activities of daily living, and not too much, but potentially the IDLs, I call that maybe phase one. This is where you're still really pretty good independence, but there's some uh, you know, their housing isn't necessarily set up for aging in place, let alone to be able to go there to care for them if they're aging in place. So this is a good time to uh, start talking about what it looks like. And granted, these are hard conversations and certainly not easy for me. We want to be careful that we're not crossing the line of feeling like we're disrespecting our parents, their dignity. And parents don't want to be told what to do, just like we don't when we were teens. So how do you navigate all that? So that phase one where this is a really good time to be listening to podcasts like this, reaching out to people like you, doing your research to understand kind of what's coming around the corner, but really first and foremost, building your support network kind of toolbox. So family, friends, caretakers already, or understanding who your parents' primary care physicians are, learning everything you can about this industry, what's within 10 miles of resources for your parents, or if you're going to relocate, what's around you. So just doing everything you can and maybe talking, listening to people that might be at the same stage as us, but just getting that chest of understanding and also knowing that it's not going to be a linear deal. It's going to have its
Yeah.
swerves and this and that. But the more you can build that knowledge now is going to help you navigate that a little bit better and start having those conversations with your siblings first, if you have siblings. And then talking to mom and dad at this point, I think one of the easiest things to do is, if they're open, to make it like a field trip. So maybe you're taking your mom to go find her new pair of shoes or whatever. You're going on a shopping trip. Say, hey, I heard this community over here had this entertainer was going to be there and I can have a free lunch. Why don't we just go check it out? I don't know I don't even know what goes on behind those doors. What if we just go check that out and make it like the field trip?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a good way to dip your toe into what like a
Yeah.
communal setting would be like at a more choice-based, when they're still able to make that choice of where they go. So that then they can get a feel for, maybe this isn't too bad. Maybe this could be, so they can at least start that process.
Yeah. It's almost like when you start talking to your kids about going to college, you kind of change your role from being, you're going to do it this way as a parent, to, what do you think is going to be best for you? And as a coach and a mentor. And I feel like if you would enter these conversations as, I just want to help, I'm not telling you what to do, letting them feel like they're still in charge, even though you might be working behind the scenes to pull some levers. I'm guessing that would probably have more success. What's your opinion of, do you think people should pursue home health care for as long as they can before you move into a different living situation? Or what's your opinion about that whole dynamic?
Mm-hmm. Oh, very, very important topic to discuss. And, quite honestly, I'd say 90+% of people just want to stay in their homes and age in
Sure.
place, right?
Yep.
It's just preferable. Things are there. If they choose to stay there, if they're in a position where they can choose, because that's kind of important and maybe to bookmark as we talk about the different levels of care. Absolutely, home health is a great supplement. And usually it's kind of the first point of connection into senior living. And a lot of times it's not by choice. The number one reason why a lot of those people are starting to be brought in is mom and dad have a fall. They've had to go into some sort of critical care or acute care setting to rehabilitate. And then when they come back home, part of the whole process, they have to have some sort of home health element come in.
I see.
But these activities of daily living, those first ones, usually a first point of home health is Is there a neighbor that maybe you could pay so much for? Do you have a cousin, or is there maybe a somebody that's doing this as a side gig that might want to help your parents? Just on maybe they can bring them meals.
Mm.
Maybe they can go and do a load of laundry once a week, or even what if they can just go talk to them, especially if they're alone, because social isolation is such a determinant of health and health outcomes. Home health can be starting from right there, your circle of friends and family, but then kind of having to go on and do the resource and asking, the primary care, reaching out to the aging resources in your area, simple Google search, online search, and talking to your friends and family. Who do you recommend? Um, Absolutely, that's going to be probably the first step, and it's a wonderful first step, um, for as long as they can afford it too. And it's there is financial implications there, but also strategies to work with
Yeah.
that.
When is it a good time for a family to bring in someone like you, a professional, to help with the real estate issue, um, knowing that there needs to be a change?
Hmm. Yeah, and that's such a there's several ways to answer that too, and depending on what real estate hat that is on. So sometimes to pay for these care settings, which when these choice based, the active adult, independent, and assisted living, it's private pay.
What do you
And
mean by that? The family's paying, not an insurance company or Medicare?
great thing to clarify. So, yes, this is Medicare is not going to pay for
Right.
an assisted living community. Medicare is not going to pay for an independent living community or active adult. Um, they will pay for a stint and maybe a skilled, like a week or so under skilled. But once you get into a community that's going to help with, the shelter, the med management, or just even 24-hour on-site staff, meals, laundry, that's going to be out of pocket. So back to the real estate element, probably the biggest resource for funds to pay for that for a lot of people is their house. So on their real estate end, equity, do they need to sell their home to help pay for that? My other real estate on the commercial end, I can come in. I have a national reach with the group with what I do on helping investors, buyers, owners, and operators in the field of managing and operating communities. Um, Iowa, I definitely have a grasp on, but I also have connections nationwide, so it can be a resource to help first pinpoint where they are in that journey. Is it home health? Is it maybe just talking or finding resources I can help navigate and point? I'm happy to do that. Um, can also help guide on the real estate end on the home front, and then give recommendations on the bigger picture, like, okay, is this assisted living? Is this independent living? Is this skilled? Who's going to pay for that? But then putting back to you, you would be a resource in my toolbox of, okay, here's where they are. I'm not a financial services expert. That's what you do. I can help kind of get, and I have the resources to help point and direct where they go to help them further. But I can come in from a very high level to help pinpoint and ask enough questions, and then be able to hand off to I have a group of trusted professionals that I've surrounded myself with throughout my journey in this senior living world.
Hmm. Well, you brought up a really interesting point there is as far as planning for paying for care. And this goes for whether you're going to have to support your parents if they have limited resources, or is my family going to have to step in and help mom and dad? But also when you're doing your own retirement planning, you've got to bake in the potential for a long-term care need or some sort of outflow that is going to be extra to maybe what you're planning for just your own living expense. Because I'm confident you wouldn't know this off the top of your head, but I'm guessing a big bulk of the population does go into some sort of whether it's, final hospice care, but some sort of assisted living where they need help later in life has got to be definitely the majority versus the minority. Wouldn't you think, Jennifer?
So your question is, people that have kids that probably help the parents, is
Well,
that a majority?
it's
Is that
more
what your
we've got to plan for it because it's very likely that our parents are going to need it and we're going to need it as well at some point in our life.
Yeah. And this is where we really start getting into the micro, kind of the messy, muddy part of this. We have coming out of the 2008 financial fallout, coming out of the 10 and 11 financial fallouts, and these recessions, and so you're absolutely right. Along with having to support families on a financial basis, and it's even way more likely with millennials and now Gen Zs because there's few of them. There's a lot more only child or maybe one or two of them that are going to have to be caretakers. And when you're a caretaker, can you devote 100% of your time for your job to help support you financially? So finances definitely become a major player on, whether, are you part of that journey where your parents, okay, we have to work to get them into this community. What does that look like? And yeah, that does steer. Some of them maybe manage it covertly. You might have maybe we go look and set it up for mom and dad, and they don't even need to worry about it. Here it is. Go take care of that. If some kids have to do that for mom and dad.
Yeah.
But a good chunk, and I saw this as a manager living day to day and how these services were paid for. I'd say probably 30% of the children of the community that I was at had some helped with resources along the way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're getting near our time, and you've been so generous to share all this information with us. Is there 2 or 3 things that you could leave with the audience that would say, if this is becoming something that you're talking about in your family, here are the first 2 to 3 things that I would do to educate myself and or take action on to get ready for this change with my parents?
Yeah, and it's such a big topic as we've seen, and
Hmm.
to boil it down, I think, first and foremost, just educate yourself. There is a lot of information out there. And depending on where you are in kind of that process, like I said, there is going to be different information for where you are. So start there, just do some simple queries and just see where it goes. Along those lines. Particularly educate yourself on having these conversations with mom and dad. Go in knowing it's probably not going to be easy, but just like even in marriage, starting a conversation with mom and dad instead of like leading with a question, which kind of puts mom and dad on defensive. An example would be like, well, what's going to happen if you fall and nobody's here to do this? Or what's going to happen if you can't take care of your finances? Or what's going to happen? Instead of these broad based questions, start with an I statement. So, you know, I'm concerned if you fall again and I'm not here to do that, what that's going to look like for you to be able to get help at the phone. Or, I'm concerned seeing these bills that, are being able to, it doesn't look like you're able to take care of them or they're running behind. I'm concerned about that. And I'd like to talk about that further. Just simple I statements to help bring these up. And then third, helping your parents and but also really just, I go back to that first statement, give yourself some grace and know that it's not going to be easy. Um, it can be easier. It's not going to be linear. But just also kind of try to find moments of to be able to smile and laugh and to be lighthearted along the journey too.
Hmm.
And part of that is, what is your personal boundary on, and this is a conversation we all need to have with ourselves when mom and dad come to this point. What does that look like where I say, I can't handle this, I have to bring in the troops, or this is beyond me?
Yeah.
um, it's that personal boundary that you need to know where you are, and it might change and it's going to evolve, but it's not selfish. It's just kind of a good way for you to be the best that you can in the moment, for your family and for yourself and your family that you're taking care of.
Yeah. Well, it's such a sensitive area. And thank you so much, Jennifer, for all that you shared. It's so helpful. And I think it is so sensitive because I think there's just a lot of guilt that we feel as the children that we have to help our parents with a change like this. And sometimes we feel like if we would do more, they would be better off. But what I'm hearing you say is we've got to have a boundary to where we can only do what we can only do. And it's almost like if you have a wayward kid, you can only help the kid so much. If they're going to go off the rails, sometimes you have to step back a little bit and have a boundary there. No different probably in this whole journey is saying I can do what I can do, but at some point we're all going to need help. And how to, using the I statement like you mentioned and things like that are just great tips for getting through this and, managing it. And as I mentioned earlier on, we're seeing this so much in practice with our clients and friends these days. And we can all learn from each other and, bringing in a community or calling people that have already been through it. How did you handle this? And when it's time, getting an expert like Jennifer. So if people want to reach out to you, Jen, what's the best way for them to learn more about what you do and get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. I've made it easy. You can email me at jennifer@jensenior.com, JENNSENIOR.com. So Jennifer@jensenior.com. I'm happy to take any questions, and definitely have resources at my ready to point and direct and help out along the journey as I can.
Great. We'll include that email address in the show notes so you can click on that to see that if you weren't able to write it down. But what an amazing resource Jennifer could be. And I hope you'll all reach out to her as you need it. And Jennifer, so good to catch up with you and to,
Always.
I think, reconnected with LinkedIn. Like I said, a lot of history between Jen and I, but we've had some great times together and enacted a lot of changes in our community that I'm still very proud of that we did, that got that Ingersoll corridor now is completely changed. It's completely different from when we started, and we can rest knowing we had a little hand in all that. And I would imagine in your work, having a little hand in making some parents' lives better has got to be a huge rewarding thing. So thank you so much for being with us today.
I appreciate it, Matt. Thank you so much.
You bet.